The pen scratched across parchment, sealing her fate in 3 seconds flat. Eliza Harrow didn't realize she'd just married the most dangerous man in the kingdom until the clerk's face went white. Not pale, white, like he'd watched someone step into an open grave. "Miss, which document did you just sign?" Her hand froze. The registry. The marriage contract. Oh God. The Duke stood 20 feet away, broad shoulders carved from winter itself, watching her with eyes that could gut a man at 50 paces. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the woman who'd accidentally become his wife. This wasn't supposed to be her story. She was the practical sister, the forgettable one, the girl who kept the accounts while prettier women got proposals. But now she was trapped in a contract with a man they called the Iron Duke, and he looked ready to bury her in the same grave she'd just dug. If you want to see how a single mistake destroys everything and how one overlooked woman fights her way back, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button. You're going to need it for what comes next. The Harrow family carriage hit another rut, and Eliza's head cracked against the window frame for the 3rd time in an hour. She didn't complain. Complaining required someone to listen, and her mother had perfected the art of looking directly through her second daughter as if she were fog. "Stop slouching, Vivian." Her mother's voice could cut glass. "The Duke's staff will be watching from the moment we arrive." Vivian adjusted her posture with practiced grace, golden curls catching the afternoon light streaming through the carriage window. Everything about Eliza's younger sister seemed designed to catch light. Her hair, her smile, the diamond pendant resting against her collarbone like a declaration of worth. Eliza shifted in her seat, her own brown hair twisted into a practical knot that pulled at her temples. Her dress was nice enough, midnight blue with modest embroidery, but next to Vivian's cream silk and rose detailing, she looked like the help. "This is your moment, darling." Their mother reached across to straighten Vivian's necklace. Duke Vale rarely entertains, and never for trivial matters. That he agreed to host the signing himself means he takes this alliance seriously. "He barely knows me, Mama." Vivian's voice held a thread of uncertainty that made Eliza glance up from the ledger balanced on her knee. "He knows your dowry. He knows your family name. The rest is decoration." Their mother smiled. "All teeth and ambition." "You'll learn that marriage among our class isn't about knowing each other. It's about what you bring to the table." Eliza kept her eyes on the numbers swimming across the page. Purchase orders for the signing ceremony, guest accommodations, a string quartet nobody asked for but their mother insisted upon because the Havertons would expect it. She'd checked every figure twice, caught 3 overcharges and 1 completely fraudulent invoice for premium candle wax that turned out to be standard tallow at luxury prices. Her father never noticed these things. Her mother considered them beneath her attention. So Eliza handled it, the way she handled everything nobody else wanted to touch. The carriage lurched again. This time, the inkwell toppled, and Eliza grabbed it before it could ruin 6 hours of work. A drop splattered across her thumb, dark blue against pale skin. "Do try not to arrive looking like a clerk, Eliza." Her mother didn't even glance her way. "I won't have the Duke's household thinking we brought a scribe instead of a daughter. Someone has to make sure we're not being robbed blind by the vendors. That's what we pay a steward for. Our steward is 67 and can't read without his spectacles, which he lost last month. I've been managing the account since September." Her mother's expression flickered, something between irritation and the faint acknowledgement that her eldest daughter occasionally proved useful in deeply unflattering ways. "Just keep yourself presentable and quiet. This day is about Vivian." Every day was about Vivian, and before her it had been about their older brother Marcus until he'd taken a commission with the Royal Navy and disappeared into the Atlantic. Now the family's entire fortune balanced on Vivian's shoulders, or more accurately, on her face, her dowry, and her ability to land a husband powerful enough to erase 3 generations of Harrow family debt. Duke Roderick Vale was that husband. Eliza had never met him. Few people had. He kept to his northern estate, appeared in Parliament only when voting on critical matters, and had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and colder than a January river. Rumor said he'd refused 12 marriage proposals before Vivian's father secured the match, through a combination of political leverage and strategic desperation. The fact that he'd agreed to marry at all was a minor miracle. The fact that he'd chosen Vivian was pure calculation. "Do you think he'll be handsome?" Vivian asked suddenly, her voice small. Their mother laughed. "Darling, he's a duke. Handsome is irrelevant. I'd still like to know if my husband will be pleasant to look at. He's wealthy, titled, and 43 years old. Expect distinguished, not dashing." Their mother's tone left no room for romance. "You'll have separate bedrooms, separate social circles, and a very generous household allowance. That's all that matters." Eliza watched her sister's face. The way Vivian's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, the tight grip on her reticule, the shallow breathing that suggested barely contained panic. "It'll be fine," Eliza said quietly. Vivian looked at her, really looked, which was rare. "You don't know that. I know you've been trained for this since you were 8 years old. You can manage a dinner party, navigate court politics, and smile through anything. If anyone can handle the Iron Duke, it's you." The Iron Duke. Vivian's laugh was brittle. "Do you know why they call him that? Because he's unyielding in negotiations. Because he's heartless." Vivian twisted the ribbon on her reticule until it frayed. "They say his first wife died of loneliness, just wasted away in that enormous estate because he never spoke to her except at formal dinners." "That's gossip. Gossip usually has roots in truth." Their mother cut in, sharp as a blade. "His first wife died of consumption, which had nothing to do with loneliness, and everything to do with weak lungs. You will not arrive at Vale House spreading hysterical rumors like some tavern girl. Am I clear?" Vivian went silent. Eliza returned to her ledger, but the numbers blurred. She couldn't shake the image of her sister, golden, fragile Vivian, locked away in some northern fortress with a man who saw her as a contract obligation. But what choice was there? Their father had gambled away half the estate. Creditors circled like crows. This marriage would erase the debt, restore the family name, and secure their future. All it cost was Vivian's life. The carriage slowed. Through the window, Eliza caught her first glimpse of Vale House. It wasn't a house. It was a statement. Gray stone walls rose 4 stories high, crowned with turrets that belonged on a fortress. The grounds stretched in every direction, manicured gardens, a massive fountain, oak trees older than the kingdom itself. Everything about it screamed power, control, and money so old it had calcified into architecture. "Good God," Vivian whispered. Their mother's smile turned triumphant. "Yes, very good indeed." The carriage rolled through iron gates that looked like they could withstand a siege. Guards flanked the entrance, not decorative ceremonial guards, but actual armed men who watched the approaching vehicle with professional detachment. Eliza's stomach tightened. This wasn't a wedding. It was a business transaction conducted in a place designed to remind everyone exactly who held the power. The carriage stopped. A footman in Duke's livery opened the door, his expression blank as fresh parchment. Their mother descended first, movements calibrated for maximum grace. Vivian followed, picture perfect despite the fear Eliza could see trembling through her hands. Eliza came last, ledger tucked under one arm, trying not to trip over her hem. The entrance hall swallowed them whole. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, a chandelier the size of a carriage dripping crystal like frozen rain. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Vales staring down with the same ice-chip eyes, an aristocratic disdain. "The Duke will receive you in the East Drawing Room," the footman's voice echoed. "This way." They followed him through hallways that felt more like cathedral corridors, too grand, too cold, too designed to make visitors feel small. Eliza counted doorways, 14 before they reached the drawing room. Each one probably led to some vast, unused space slowly gathering dust and ghosts. The drawing room doors opened, and there he was. Duke Roderick Vale stood with his back to them, staring out a window that overlooked the northern gardens. Tall, easily 6 feet, shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the duchy, the title, and the reputation. Dark hair threaded with silver at the temples. Expensive coat cut to emphasize power, not fashion. He didn't turn when they entered. "Your Grace." Their mother's voice dripped honey and ambition. "May I present my daughter, Lady Vivian Harrow." Vivian curtsied, a perfect execution of years of training. The Duke turned. Eliza's breath caught. They called him the Iron Duke because he looked forged, all hard angles and sharp edges, like someone had taken aristocratic features and beaten them against stone until everything soft burned away. His eyes were gray. Not blue-gray or green-gray, but the pure, uncompromising gray of winter sky before snow. He looked at Vivian the way a jeweler might assess a stone. Clinical. Measuring value. "Lady Vivian." His voice matched his appearance, deep, controlled, empty of warmth. "Welcome to Vale House." "Thank you, Your Grace." Vivian's voice only trembled slightly. "It's an honor to—" "The contracts are prepared in the study. Shall we proceed?" Not a question. A statement wrapped in a courtesy he didn't bother to mean. Their mother's smile never wavered. "Of course, Your Grace. We're eager to formalize this blessed union." The Duke's gaze flicked to Eliza for half a second, long enough to register her presence, categorize her as irrelevant, and dismiss her entirely. She should have been relieved. Instead, something prickled at the back of her neck, a warning she couldn't name. They moved to the study, another cavernous room filled with leather-bound books. Nobody read, and furniture built for intimidation rather than comfort. A massive desk dominated the space, and spread across it were documents that represented the end of Vivian's autonomy. Marriage contract, property agreements, dowry transfers. Pages and pages of legal language that boiled down to one simple truth. Vivian was being purchased. "Your family solicitor?" The Duke glanced at their mother. "Mr. Pemberton. He's reviewing the final terms now." A thin man in spectacles hunched over the documents, occasionally making small notations with a pen that scratched like a dying insect. Eliza drifted to the side of the room, ledger still under her arm. Nobody noticed. They never did. The Duke and her mother discussed settlement terms with the warmth of two countries negotiating border disputes. Vivian stood silent, hands clasped, face arranged in pleasant blankness. "The dowry includes the southern timber holdings?" The Duke's finger traced a line of text. "As outlined in Clause 7, yes." "And the outstanding debts referenced here?" Their mother's smile tightened microscopically. "Will be settled upon marriage finalization." Translation: the Duke was paying off their father's gambling debts as part of the deal. Another layer of humiliation wrapped in legal formality. Eliza found herself studying the Duke, the way he held himself, spine straight, shoulders back, every movement economical. A man who'd learned early that wasted motion was wasted power. His face gave away nothing. No pleasure at acquiring a beautiful wife, no satisfaction at a favorable contract, just cold assessment and colder execution. Vivian was going to wither in this house. Everything appears in order. Mr. Pemberton looked up, glasses sliding down his narrow nose. "Pending signatures, the contract will be binding under kingdom law." "Excellent." Their mother practically glowed. "Vivian, darling, one moment." The Duke's voice cut clean. "I want my own solicitor to review the timber holdings clause. There's an ambiguity in the language. Your Grace, I assure you, I don't require assurance. I require clarity." He gestured to a younger man standing near the bookshelf, another lawyer, apparently, because he immediately stepped forward and began examining the documents with methodical precision. The room fell into awkward silence. Vivian shifted her weight, a hairline fracture in her composure. Their mother's jaw tightened. Eliza watched the Duke's solicitor work, noting the way he cross-referenced 3 different sections, made a notation, and frowned. "There," the solicitor pointed. "This clause references primary timber holdings but doesn't specify the western parcels. Technically, that could exclude half the territory." "An oversight," Mr. Pemberton said quickly. "Easily amended. Amend it now." The Duke's tone allowed no argument. More scratching of pens, more whispered consultations. The clock on the mantel ticked through 15 minutes of tense silence, while lawyers argued in undertones about property boundaries and legal precedent. Eliza felt Vivian's panic rising like floodwater. "May I see the garden?" Vivian's voice came out too bright. "I've heard the roses are exceptional." The Duke glanced at her, expression unreadable. "The roses are dormant. It's November." "Oh yes, of course." Silence crashed back down. Eliza wanted to say something, anything, to break the suffocating tension. But what could she say? That her sister was terrified? That this whole arrangement felt like watching someone sign away their soul? That the Duke looked at Vivian the way normal people looked at furniture? Resolved, the solicitor finally stepped back. The amended language is clear. Then we may proceed. The Duke moved to the desk. Lady Vivian, if you would. Vivian approached like someone walking to the gallows. 2 contracts lay side by side on the desk. Identical documents, both requiring signatures from bride and groom. You'll sign here. The solicitor indicated the line. And here, your full legal name. Vivian picked up the pen. Her hand shook. Eliza watched her sister's face, watched the last flicker of hope die somewhere behind those carefully painted eyes. The pen touched parchment. Wait, their mother's voice. Eliza, fetch my reticule from the carriage. I want Vivian to sign with the Harrow family pen. A delay tactic. A moment to let Vivian compose herself. Of course. Eliza set down her ledger and turned toward the door. No need. The Duke's voice stopped her. We'll use mine. He produced a pen from his coat, simple, expensive, impersonal as everything else about him. Vivian took it. The metal trembled in her grip. Vivian Rosalind Harrow. She spoke her own name like an epitaph. The pen lowered. Actually, their mother again, voice strained. Perhaps we should review once more. Mother. Vivian's voice was quiet. It's fine. She signed. Her name flowed across the parchment in elegant script, and Eliza felt something crack in the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just a small, terrible sound like ice breaking under weight. Your turn, Your Grace. The solicitor gestured to the second contract. The Duke signed without hesitation. His signature was nothing like Vivian's delicate loops. It was slashed across the page in hard, angular strokes that looked more like a challenge than a name. Witnessed and sealed. The solicitor blotted both documents. The marriage is... Wait. Everyone turned. Mr. Pemberton stood frozen, staring at the contracts with an expression Eliza had never seen on a lawyer's face before. Pure horror. What is it? The Duke's voice dropped 10 degrees. Pemberton's fingers shook as he pointed at the second contract, the one the Duke had just signed. This isn't the marriage contract. Silence. What? Their mother stepped forward. This is the property transfer agreement for the dowry holdings. Pemberton's voice climbed toward panic. The marriage contract it's here. He shuffled papers frantically. Someone signed the wrong document. Every eye in the room turned to Vivian, but Vivian stood motionless, staring at the contracts with obvious confusion. I signed the one on the left, she said slowly. You told me to sign the one on the left. The marriage contract was on the right. The solicitor's face had gone the color of old parchment. The documents were... Someone must have moved them. I didn't move anything. Vivian's voice rose. I signed exactly where you told me. Then who? Eliza's blood turned to ice water. She looked down at the desk, at the 2 contracts, at the signatures, at her ledger, sitting exactly where she'd set it down, on top of the marriage contract. When she'd put it down, she'd covered the right-hand document, and Vivian, not seeing it, had signed the only visible contract, the property transfer, which meant, oh God! The words came out before Eliza could stop them. Everyone turned, and Eliza realized with sickening clarity what she'd done. The Duke had signed the marriage contract, but there was no bride signature on it, because the bride had signed the wrong document, which meant the marriage contract had one signature, and someone else had to have signed it. The solicitor grabbed the marriage contract, scanning the bride's signature line. His face went white. Eliza Margaret Harrow. The room stopped breathing. What? Their mother's voice cracked like breaking glass. The solicitor held up the contract. The bride's signature reads, Eliza Margaret Harrow. This contract, the legal marriage contract, was signed by the eldest daughter. Every eye in the room locked on Eliza. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. That's impossible. Her mother crossed the room in 3 strides and ripped the contract from the solicitor's hands. Eliza didn't sign anything. She was standing over there. But her voice died as she stared at the signature. Eliza's signature, in Eliza's handwriting, on the marriage contract. I didn't. Eliza's voice came out strangled. I was taking notes. I had my ledger. You signed this. The Duke's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. He held the contract, staring at it, then at her. Those gray eyes locked on Eliza with an intensity that made her bones ache. I was working on the household accounts, Eliza said desperately. I wasn't paying attention. I thought someone asked me to witness. I didn't realize. You signed a marriage contract. I signed a document. I didn't look at what it was. I was distracted. By what? By the fact that nobody notices me. The words burst out, raw and furious. I've been standing in this room for an hour, and not one person has acknowledged my existence. I was taking notes because that's what I do, handle the boring details nobody else wants to touch. And someone put a pen in my hand and I signed where they pointed. Who gave you the pen? Eliza's mind spun backward. The solicitor? Mr. Pemberton? One of the clerks shuffling papers. She couldn't remember. I don't know. You don't know. The Duke's voice was so cold it burned. You signed a legal contract and you don't know who handed you the pen. It was chaos. Everyone was reviewing documents. I thought I was witnessing a property clause. This isn't a property clause. He held up the contract. This is a marriage binding under kingdom law, signed by both parties, witnessed by 3 legal representatives, sealed and registered. The room tilted. No. Their mother's voice shook. This is a mistake. We'll void it. You cannot void a legal marriage contract. The Duke's solicitor spoke quietly, but his words landed like stones. Not without cause, and clerical error doesn't qualify. Then we'll claim fraud. On whose part? The solicitor gestured to the contract. Both signatures are legitimate. Both parties signed of their own free will. The witnesses are all licensed legal professionals. There's no fraud here, just a catastrophic mistake, their mother finished. Her face had gone gray. Your Grace, surely you understand this was never intended. My daughter Eliza has no dowry, no training, no... She signed the contract. The Duke's eyes never left Eliza's face, which makes her my wife. The words hung in the air like an execution sentence. Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stand there while her entire world collapsed around her. We can fix this. Her mother's desperation was palpable. We'll draft new contracts. Vivian will sign the proper documents. We'll pay for the legal fees, whatever it takes. I don't want new contracts. The Duke's voice was flat, final. The marriage is legal. It stands. You can't possibly. I can, and I will. He folded the contract with precise, controlled movements. This matter is settled. But Vivian, the agreement was for Vivian. The agreement was for a Harrow daughter. I now have one. He glanced at Vivian with something that might have been dismissal or relief. Eliza couldn't tell. Your younger daughter is free to pursue other arrangements. This is insane. Their mother's composure shattered completely. You don't even know Eliza. She's not suitable. She's legally bound to me. That's all that matters. Your Grace, please. Mr. Pemberton stepped forward. Surely we can find a reasonable solution. We have a solution. A marriage contract, signed, sealed, and binding. The Duke's gaze returned to Eliza. My wife will be ready to depart within the hour. Eliza found her voice. Depart. For Vale House, the northern estate, we leave at sunset. I can't. I'm not prepared. You should have considered that before signing a marriage contract. The unfairness of it hit her like a physical blow. I didn't know what I was signing. Ignorance isn't a legal defense. You could refuse this. Eliza heard the pleading in her own voice and hated it. You could walk away. Tell them it was a mistake. I could. His expression didn't change. I won't. Why? For the first time, something flickered in those cold gray eyes. Not warmth, not kindness, calculation. Because, he said quietly, I agreed to marry a Harrow daughter to settle your family's debts and secure a political alliance. I have what I contracted for. The specific daughter is irrelevant. The words landed like slaps. Irrelevant. Interchangeable. A contract obligation. Eliza looked at her mother, saw the horror and fury warring on her face. Looked at Vivian, saw relief and guilt tangled together. Looked at the solicitors and clerks and witnesses who'd watched this disaster unfold. No one was going to save her. No one could. She'd signed her own trap and walked straight into it. 1 hour, the Duke repeated. Pack whatever you need. We won't return to the city for some time. He turned and walked out, just left her standing there, legally married, completely unprepared, and utterly alone. The door closed behind him with a soft, decisive click, and Eliza's old life ended. The carriage lurched forward, and Eliza's stomach lurched with it. She sat alone on the velvet bench, a single trunk containing her entire hastily packed life rattling in the compartment above. Across from her, the Duke stared out the window with the same expression he'd worn in the study. Absolute zero. He hadn't spoken since they'd left Vale House an hour ago. Eliza had tried twice, once to ask about the northern estate, once to clarify sleeping arrangements. Both attempts had been met with silence so complete she'd wondered if he'd gone deaf. Now she sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the countryside blur past, and tried not to think about the fact that her mother had cried. Actually cried. Not the delicate dabbing of tears that aristocratic women deployed at funerals. Real sobbing that had made Vivian wrap her arms around her and whisper frantic apologies. "It should have been me," Vivian had said against Eliza's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. This should have been me." But it wasn't, and no amount of sorry would change the signature on that contract. The worst part? Eliza wasn't even sure Vivian was actually sorry. There'd been relief in her sister's eyes, guilty, horrible relief that she'd escaped. "We're stopping." The Duke's voice startled her so badly she flinched. The carriage was indeed slowing, pulling off the main road toward what looked like a coaching inn. Small, respectable, the kind of place where minor gentry stopped to rest horses and pretend they weren't exhausted. "I thought we were going straight to the northern estate," Eliza said. "We are. This is a scheduled stop." The carriage halted. A footman opened the door, and the Duke descended without waiting for her. Eliza gathered her skirts and climbed out, nearly twisting her ankle on the uneven ground. The Duke was already walking toward the inn's entrance, expecting her to follow like a trained dog. She followed. Inside, the innkeeper practically prostrated himself at the sight of the Duke's signet ring. "Your Grace, such an honor. We have your usual rooms prepared." "One room." The innkeeper blinked. "I'm sorry?" "One room. My wife and I won't require separate accommodations." Eliza's face caught fire. "Actually, one room," the Duke repeated, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. The innkeeper's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline, but he recovered quickly. "Of course, Your Grace, the Wellington suite. I'll have your luggage brought up immediately." Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to demand separate rooms, separate floors, separate inns. But the Duke was already climbing the stairs and making a scene in front of servants. Seemed like a guaranteed way to make this nightmare worse. The Wellington suite turned out to be 2 rooms connected by a door, a sitting area, and a bedroom. One bedroom, with one massive 4-poster bed draped in burgundy velvet. "I'll take the sofa," Eliza said immediately. The Duke shrugged out of his coat and draped it over a chair. "Do what you want." He disappeared into the bedroom and closed the door. Eliza stood in the sitting room, shaking with something between fury and terror. This was insane. All of it. 24 hours ago, she'd been balancing household accounts and avoiding her mother's criticisms. Now she was legally married to a man who looked at her like she was a filing error. She should cry. That's what any normal woman would do. But Eliza had learned years ago that crying didn't solve problems. It just made your eyes puffy and gave your mother another reason to call you weak. Instead, she did what she always did when the world stopped making sense. She made a list. Sitting at the small writing desk, she found paper and pen and began documenting everything she knew. Facts. Legally married to Duke Roderick Vale, contract cannot be voided without cause. Heading to Northern Estate, location unknown. No dowry, no training, no preparation. Family likely in chaos. Duke clearly hates this situation, but refuses to fix it. Questions. Why won't he void the contract? What does he gain from keeping me? What happens when we reach the estate? Can I survive this? She stared at the last question for a long moment. Could she? The bedroom door opened. The Duke emerged in shirt sleeves, cravat gone, looking somehow more dangerous in casual dress than he had in formal attire. He glanced at her writing, then at her face. Making an escape plan? Making sense of this disaster. Good luck. He poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. I've been trying for 6 hours. It was the most human thing he'd said since the study. You could still fix it, Eliza said quietly. Annulment, divorce, whatever legal mechanism exists. All of which require public scandal, parliamentary approval, and months of legal proceedings. He took a long drink. No. So I'm just stuck. We're both stuck. He refilled his glass. Don't pretend you're the only victim here. The audacity of that statement made her stand. You chose this. I signed the wrong piece of paper. You looked at that contract and decided to keep me anyway, because voiding it would have created worse problems. Worse than being trapped in a marriage neither of us wants? Yes. The word was so flat, so certain, it stopped her cold. Explain. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time she saw something beneath the ice. Exhaustion. Deep, bone-level weariness that suggested this man hadn't slept properly in years. I needed a wife, he said. Not for love or companionship or any romantic nonsense. For survival. Do you understand the difference? No. He smiled, but it was a terrible expression. My estate is failing, not financially, politically. I have enemies in Parliament who've spent the last decade trying to strip my titles, seize my lands, and destroy everything my family built. The only thing keeping them at bay is the appearance of stability, a wife, an heir. The illusion that House Vale will continue. So you agreed to marry Vivian for political cover. Exactly. And when you signed that contract instead, I had a choice. Admit the mistake publicly and hand my enemies ammunition, or keep the marriage and maintain the facade. I'm a facade. You're a solution to a problem. He drained his glass. Not the solution I wanted, but the one I got. The brutal honesty of it was almost refreshing. And what happens when your enemies realize you married the wrong sister, the one with no dowry, no connections, no value? Then we make sure they don't realize it. How? You learn, fast. He set down the glass. The northern estate is isolated. You'll have time to study what's expected of a duchess before anyone important sees you. I'm not Vivienne. I can't just smile and curtsy my way through this. Good. Vivienne would have been useless. His gaze sharpened. You balanced your family's accounts. You caught fraudulent invoices. You noticed things other people miss. That's more valuable than being decorative. The compliment, if it was a compliment, landed wrong, like he was evaluating livestock. I'm not your employee. No, you're my wife, which is worse. He moved toward the bedroom door. Get some sleep. We leave at dawn. Where will you sleep? In the bed I paid for. Heat flooded her face. We're not. Relax. I'm not interested in consummating a marriage I didn't choose. His voice was arctic. You'll take the left side, I'll take the right. We'll maintain a civilized distance and pretend this is normal. Nothing about this is normal. Welcome to my life. He closed the door. Eliza stood there, trembling with a cocktail of emotions she couldn't name. Anger, yes. Fear, absolutely. But underneath it all, something else. Determination. If this man thought she'd just collapse into obedient silence, he was wrong. She'd spent her entire life being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. She knew how to survive in spaces that didn't want her. And if the Duke of Vale thought a contract made her his property, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. She changed into her nightdress in the sitting room, then approached the bedroom door like it was a lion's den. Inside, the Duke was already in bed, turned away from her, apparently asleep. Eliza climbed onto the left side of the mattress, staying as close to the edge as physically possible. The bed was massive. They were easily 3 feet apart. It felt like 3 inches. She lay rigid, staring at the canopy, listening to his breathing. Even in sleep, he sounded controlled, Measured inhales, precise exhales, nothing wasted. Stop thinking so loud, Chol, he said into the darkness. I'm not thinking. You're vibrating with anxiety. It's distracting. Sorry, my mental breakdown is inconvenient for you. Silence. Then, did you really not know what you were signing? The question caught her off guard. No, I thought I was witnessing a property transfer. I sign documents all the time, invoices, receipts, household orders. I didn't look at the header. That's remarkably careless. That's what happens when you're invisible. People stop expecting you to read the fine print because they assume you don't matter enough to cause damage. More silence. Your mother called you unsuitable, he said finally. In the study. What did she mean? Eliza's throat tightened. That I'm not pretty enough, charming enough, or valuable enough to be a duchess. That I was supposed to fade into the background and manage ledgers while Vivian collected proposals. And yet you're the one who married a duke. By accident. Still counts. She turned her head on the pillow, trying to see his face in the darkness. Do you enjoy being cruel? I enjoy being honest. Most people can't tell the difference. There's a difference between honesty and brutality. Not in my world. Then your world is broken. He laughed. A short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Finally, something we agree on. The conversation died. Eliza lay awake for hours, listening to the inn's nighttime sounds. Footsteps in the hall, horses in the stable yard, the distant clatter of the kitchen closing. Somewhere around midnight, she finally slept and woke to chaos. Shouting, running footsteps, the Duke's voice cutting through the noise like a whip. Eliza bolted upright. The bed beside her was empty, already cold. She threw on her robe and stumbled into the sitting room. The Duke stood by the window fully dressed, his face carved from granite. Two of his men flanked the door, and the innkeeper wrung his hands in the corner. What's happened? Eliza demanded. The Duke glanced at her. Get dressed. We're leaving. It's not even dawn. Now. The tone left no room for argument. Eliza dressed in record time, fingers fumbling over buttons. When she emerged, the sitting room was empty except for one guard. Where is he? In the stable yard, my lady. There's been... The guard hesitated. An incident. Eliza didn't wait for details. She ran. The stable yard was controlled chaos. Guards surrounded the Duke's carriage, weapons drawn. Servants huddled near the inn's back entrance. And the Duke stood in the center of it all, holding something small and dark. A letter. What is it? Eliza approached, despite the guard's protest. The Duke's eyes met hers. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine emotion there. Rage. Someone left this on the carriage seat. He held up the letter. Sealed with my family crest. Forged. Eliza's blood went cold. What does it say? He handed it to her. The handwriting was elegant, formal, and venomous. Congratulations on your marriage, Your Grace. How unfortunate that your new bride is so utterly unsuitable. One wonders how long before the kingdom realizes you've married a nobody. Or perhaps they already know. Perhaps they're simply waiting to see how spectacular your fall will be. No signature, no seal beyond the forged crest, just pure calculated malice. Who sent this? Eliza's hand shook. Someone who knows about the wedding, someone with access to my private seal. Someone who wants me to understand that this marriage has already been noticed. His jaw tightened. Someone who's moving faster than I anticipated. Your enemies. One of them. I have several. A guard approached, breathless. Your Grace, we've searched the grounds. No sign of the courier, but... He hesitated. Speak. 3 of the inn staff are missing. The stable boy, a maid, and the night clerk. All vanished sometime after midnight. The Duke's expression went glacial. Paid off or disappeared? Unknown. Find them. I want to know who hired them and what they were told to observe. The guard nodded and ran. Eliza read the letter again, her mind racing. They're watching you. Whoever sent this wanted you to know they're tracking your movements. Yes, and they're using me as the weapon. Also, yes. She looked up at him. What happens when we reach the estate? We accelerate the plan. He took the letter back and fed it to the nearest lantern flame. The paper curled and blackened, turning to ash. You're going to learn to be a duchess in weeks instead of months, because if my enemies think they can use you against me, they're about to discover they've miscalculated. I don't understand. You don't need to. You just need to do exactly what I tell you. He turned toward the carriage. And pray that you learn fast enough to survive what's coming. The words hung in the cold morning air like a threat. Eliza climbed into the carriage, her mind spinning. Someone was watching. Someone had access to the Duke's seal. Someone wanted this marriage to destroy him. And she was the instrument of that destruction. The carriage pulled away from the inn as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. 4 hours later, they reached the northern estate. Eliza's first thought was that it looked like a prison. Gray stone walls rose from the moorland like something carved from the earth itself. No gardens, no decorative elements, just stark, brutal architecture designed to withstand siege. "Welcome to Thornfield," the Duke said flatly. "It's named Thornfield?" My great-grandfather had a sense of humor. The carriage passed through gates that looked like they hadn't fully opened in decades. The inner courtyard was vast, empty, and eerily quiet. No servants lined up to greet them. No steward rushing out with welcomes. Just silence. The Duke descended and stood looking at his own house with an expression Eliza couldn't read. "Where is everyone?" she asked. "Good question." He strode toward the main entrance. Eliza followed, her unease growing with every step. The doors were unlocked. Inside, the entrance hall was dark. Dust coated the furniture. Cobwebs clung to the chandelier. "When was the last time you were here?" Eliza whispered. 8 months ago. It wasn't like this." A sound echoed from somewhere deep in the house. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. The Duke's hand went to the sword at his hip. Eliza hadn't even noticed he was armed. A figure emerged from the shadows. An old woman, spine bent, face lined with 1,000 wrinkles. She wore a housekeeper's dress that had been black once but had faded to charcoal gray. "Your Grace, like—" Her voice was dust and gravel. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly." The Duke's tone could freeze mercury. "Where's the staff?" "Gone, Your Grace." "Gone where?" "Away. Most of them left 3 months ago, said they hadn't been paid." "They were paid. I sent the wages myself." The old woman's smile was brittle. "Perhaps the money never arrived. Perhaps it was intercepted. Perhaps someone wanted you to come home to an empty house." The Duke went very still. "Who are you?" "Mrs. Calloway. I was head housekeeper before the Exodus. Now I'm the only one left." She glanced at Eliza. "And this must be the new Duchess, the one everyone's talking about." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Everyone?" "Oh yes, word travels fast, even to the north. They say you're nobody, a mistake, a poor substitute for the real bride." Her eyes glittered in the dim light. "They say the Duke's enemies are sharpening their knives." "That's enough." The Duke's voice cracked like a whip. But Mrs. Calloway just smiled. "The master suite is prepared, Your Grace. I assumed you'd want to stay together, seeing as you're newlyweds." She turned and shuffled away, her laughter echoing through the empty halls. The Duke and Eliza stood in the ruined entrance hall of his ancestral home, surrounded by dust and silence and the weight of invisible enemies. "Welcome to your new life," he said quietly. And Eliza realized with crystal clarity that the disaster in the study had been nothing. This was where the real nightmare began. The master suite smelled like abandonment. Eliza stood in the doorway while the Duke moved through the room with controlled fury, yanking open curtains that released clouds of dust, checking the windows for signs of forced entry, examining the lock on the door connecting to his private study. "This door was sealed when I left," he said, more to himself than to her. "Someone broke the lock." "What's in there?" "Nothing now. Everything valuable was transferred to London 8 months ago." He ran a hand over the splintered wood around the lock mechanism. "But someone wanted to look." Eliza's eyes adjusted to the dim light. The room was enormous. Sitting area, dressing rooms, a bed large enough to sleep 4. Everything was covered in dust except for one chair near the fireplace. Someone had been sitting there recently. The cushion still held the impression of a body. "She's been living in here," Eliza said quietly. The Duke followed her gaze. His expression went dark. "Mrs. Calloway. Why would your housekeeper camp in the master bedroom?" "Because she's not actually my housekeeper." He crossed to the chair and picked up something from the side table, a letter, partially burned. He read what remained, then crushed it in his fist. "She's a plant. Someone put her here to watch the estate." "For who?" "Lord Ashford. This is his handwriting." The Duke threw the charred paper into the cold fireplace. "He's one of 3 men who've been trying to destroy me for the last decade. Apparently he's escalated to espionage." Eliza's mind raced. If she's been here for months, she knows the estate is vulnerable. No staff, no security, no one to stop. She stopped. "That's why you wouldn't void the marriage. You needed to come home. And you needed a witness." "Partly." "What's the other part?" He looked at her directly. "I needed someone who wouldn't break." Vivian would have lasted a week in this house before running back to London in tears. "You?" He gestured at the ruined room. "You're still standing." It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. "What do we do about Mrs. Calloway?" Eliza asked. "Nothing. Yet." The Duke moved to the window overlooking the courtyard. "If we remove her, Ashford will know we're aware of his surveillance. Better to keep her close and control what she reports. You want to feed her false information. I want to use her the way she's been using me." Eliza joined him at the window. Below, Mrs. Calloway crossed the courtyard carrying a basket, moving surprisingly fast for someone who'd seemed ancient and frail minutes ago. "She was performing," Eliza said, the bent spine, the trembling hands. "She wanted us to think she was harmless." "Yes." "How many others are there, planted in the staff, in the village, and—" "I don't know. That's the problem." He turned from the window. "Thornfield has been compromised. Until I understand the extent, we can't trust anyone." "Including each other?" The question hung between them. "You signed a contract that trapped us both," he said finally. "If you were working for Ashford, that's an elaborate and risky way to infiltrate my household." "Is that a no?" "It's a conditional yes." His gaze was clinical. "You'll be watched. Every action, every conversation, every letter you send. If you're genuine, you have nothing to worry about. If you're not—" He let the threat hang unfinished. Eliza's temper flared. "I'm trapped in a falling apart estate with a husband who treats me like a potential enemy and actual enemies watching from the shadows. Trust goes both ways. Trust is earned. Then earn mine. Stop treating me like furniture and start explaining what the hell is actually happening here." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, the Duke smiled. It was a terrible expression, all edges and no warmth. "You want the truth? Fine." He crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a decanter of whiskey, poured 2 glasses, handed her one. "Drink. You'll need it." Eliza took the glass but didn't drink. "Talk." "My father was a brilliant man and a terrible duke. He made enemies through sheer incompetence, bad investments, broken alliances, political miscalculations that cost people money and power. When he died 10 years ago, I inherited a title, an estate, and a collection of men who hated the Vale name. He drank, continued. Lord Ashford was the worst. My father promised him a mining contract, then sold the land to someone else for a better price. Ashford lost a fortune. He spent the last decade trying to reclaim it by destroying everything my family built. How? Legal challenges, parliamentary investigations, spreading rumors about mental instability, financial ruin, moral corruption. Anything to strip my titles and seize my holdings. The Duke refilled his glass. I've blocked him at every turn, but he's patient, and now he's found a new angle. Me. You. An unsuitable wife acquired through obvious desperation, proof that House Vale is collapsing. He met her eyes. If Ashford can prove this marriage is a sham, that it was arranged fraudulently or under duress, he can petition for annulment. And if the marriage is annulled, every contract and alliance tied to it becomes void, which would destroy your political standing, and open the door for him to seize Thornfield through legal mechanisms I've been using the marriage to block. Eliza's hands trembled. She set down the glass before she dropped it. So I'm not just a duchess. I'm a legal shield. You're both, and you need to be convincing in the role. He watched her face. That's why we're here, isolated, away from scrutiny. You have 6 weeks to learn everything Vivian spent her entire life preparing for. Etiquette, politics, household management, social graces, everything. 6 weeks. Ashford is hosting a winter gathering in January. Every influential lord and lady in the kingdom will attend. We'll be there, together, playing the part of a functional marriage. His voice went flat. If we fail, I lose everything, including this estate. And if we succeed, we survive, for now. The conditional nature of that promise was not lost on her. Eliza picked up the glass and drank. The whiskey burned all the way down. Who's going to teach me? We have no staff, no tutors, just a spy pretending to be a housekeeper. You're looking at your instructor. She nearly choked. You? I know what's expected of a duchess. I was married before, remember? The reminder landed like a slap. His first wife, the one who'd allegedly died of loneliness. What happened to her? Eliza asked. Really? The Duke's expression closed like a vault door. That's not relevant. You're asking me to learn from you while keeping secrets about your last wife's death. That seems relevant. She died of consumption. That's all you need to know. Did she die in this house? His silence was answer enough. Eliza looked around the master suite with new eyes. The dust. The neglect. The feeling of something broken beyond repair. You haven't been back since she died, Eliza said quietly. No. Why now? Because I had no choice. The estate was collapsing. Ashford was closing in, and I needed to secure it before everything fell apart. He set down his glass with controlled precision. Your accidental signature gave me the excuse to return, to bring a wife, to rebuild the appearance of stability, while the actual stability crumbles around us. Exactly. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Mrs. Calloway's voice called through the door. Your Grace? I've prepared a light supper in the dining room. The Duke's expression didn't change. We'll be down shortly. The footsteps retreated. She's testing us, Eliza said, seeing if we'll eat together, if we'll behave like a real married couple. Then we'll give her a performance. He moved toward the door. Remember, she's watching. Everything you say, every gesture, every moment of hesitation will be reported to Ashford. What if I make a mistake? Don't. The dining room was a masterpiece of neglect. The table could seat 30, but only 2 places were set, at opposite ends, forcing them to shout to be heard. Mrs. Calloway served the meal herself. Cold meat, stale bread, cheese that had seen better weeks. She moved between them with exaggerated care, lingering near Eliza's chair. Such a surprise, the marriage, Mrs. Calloway said, her voice syrup-sweet. The whole staff was shocked when word reached us. They'd been preparing for Lady Vivian, you see. Such a beauty, such grace. Eliza felt the jab land, but kept her face neutral. Plans change. Indeed they do. Mrs. Calloway poured wine with a trembling hand that Eliza now knew was an act. Though one wonders how such a mistake could happen. A signed contract is such a permanent thing. It was witnessed and sealed, the Duke said coldly. The circumstances are irrelevant. Of course, Your Grace. Mrs. Calloway's smile could cut glass. I'm sure the nobility will understand completely. They're always so forgiving of irregularities. The threat was barely veiled. Eliza picked up her fork and forced herself to eat the terrible food. Across the vast expanse of table, the Duke did the same, his face carved from stone. They sat in hostile silence, performing normalcy under the watchful eyes of a spy. When the meal finally ended, Mrs. Calloway cleared the plates with deliberate slowness. Will you be requiring anything else tonight, Your Grace? No, you're dismissed. Very good. I've taken the liberty of preparing the master's suite. Fresh linens, a fire in the hearth. Her eyes glittered. I assumed you'd want to stay together, being newly married. Your assumptions are correct, the Duke said flatly. Mrs. Calloway curtsied and left, but Eliza could feel her presence lingering like smoke. The moment she was gone, Eliza stood. She's going to report that we're sleeping in the same bed. Yes. And that we barely spoke during dinner. Also, yes. So we failed the test. The Duke rose. We survived the first test. That's enough for tonight. They climbed the stairs in silence. The master suite waited, door open, firelight casting dancing shadows across walls that suddenly felt too close. Eliza stopped in the doorway. I'm not sleeping in that bed with you. You don't have a choice. Mrs. Calloway will check. She'll count pillows, examine sheets, look for any evidence that we're not what? Actually married? We're barely tolerating each other. Which is why we need to be smarter. He moved into the room and began methodically checking for listening devices, running his hands along the walls, the furniture, the bed frame. Ashford is too smart to rely solely on observation. He'll have planted something to capture conversations. You think the room is rigged? I think assuming it isn't would be stupid. He found it behind the headboard, a small brass tube embedded in the wall, cleverly disguised as decorative molding, a listening device that fed into the servants' quarters. The Duke pulled it free and crushed it under his boot. That's one. There will be others. He continued searching. Found two more, one in the wardrobe, one near the fireplace. Destroyed both. Now, he said quietly, we can speak freely. Eliza sank into the chair near the fire. This is insane. This is survival. In what world is this sustainable? We can't live like prisoners in your own house, destroying surveillance equipment and performing for spies. We can for 6 weeks. That's all I need. And after the winter gathering, after we convince everyone we're a functional couple, then what? He didn't answer immediately, just stared into the fire with an expression that suggested he hadn't thought that far ahead. We'll deal with that when we reach it, he said finally. That's not a plan. That's desperation. Welcome to my entire existence. The honesty of it stunned her into silence. They prepared for bed with mechanical efficiency. Eliza changed in the dressing room. The Duke remained in the main chamber. When she emerged, he was already on his side of the massive bed, turned away, apparently asleep. Eliza climbed in, maintaining the same careful distance as the night before. But this time, she didn't stay silent. Your first wife, she said into the darkness. Did you love her? Long pause. No. Did she love you? I don't know. We barely spoke. Then how did she die of loneliness? She died of consumption. The loneliness was a symptom, not the cause. His voice was rough. She wanted a fairy tale. Love, companionship, romance. I gave her a title and an empty house. She withered. And you let her. I was 23 and drowning in debt and political warfare. I didn't have time for fairy tales. So you ignored her until she died. Yes. The bluntness of it made Eliza's chest ache. I'm not her, she said. I know. I don't want a fairy tale. Good, because I can't give you one. I want the truth. I want to know what I'm walking into. I want... She stopped, unsure how to articulate the desperate need clawing at her throat. What? His voice was quieter now. I want to survive this. And I can't do that if you keep treating me like a tool instead of a person. Silence stretched so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, I'll try. 2 words. Barely a promise. But it was more than she'd had before. Sleep came eventually, fitful and fractured by dreams of burning contracts and watching eyes. The next 6 days were brutal. The Duke woke her before dawn every morning with lessons that felt more like interrogations. Etiquette. Table manners. Proper forms of address for every rank of nobility. The difference between a morning call and an afternoon visit. How to hold a teacup. How to curtsy without looking subservient. Again, he'd say when she stumbled, a duchess doesn't apologize with her body language. I'm not apologizing. I'm showing respect. Respect is fine. Deference is weakness. Again. They ate every meal in the dining room under Mrs. Calloway's watchful eyes. performing a marriage that grew marginally less hostile with each forced conversation. Eliza learned to read his silences, anticipate his moods, redirect conversations when they veered too close to topics the housekeeper didn't need to hear. In private, the Duke drilled her relentlessly. Who controls the Eastern textile trade? Lord Harrington, but his son is angling to take over and will likely succeed by spring. Why does that matter? Because the son supports your political rivals. If he gains control, you lose a key ally. Good. Next. How do you politely decline an invitation from someone you can't afford to offend? Express regret, cite prior commitment, offer alternative engagement, and if they push, maintain position without explaining. Explanation implies negotiation. Hours of this, day after day, until Eliza's head throbbed and her patience frayed to nothing. On the 7th day, she broke. Stop. She threw down the etiquette manual he'd been making her memorize. I can't do this. The Duke looked up from his notes. Can't or won't? Both. I'm not Vivian. I can't transform into some perfect duchess in 6 weeks. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be convincing. Same thing in your world. No, perfect is unsustainable. Convincing just requires confidence and commitment to the performance. He leaned back in his chair. You've been managing your family's accounts for years. You caught fraud. You balanced budgets. You handled crisis after crisis without falling apart. That requires the same skills as navigating nobility: observation, calculation, and nerves. That was numbers. This is people. People are just numbers with egos. He stood. You can do this. You just need to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like someone with power. I don't have power. You're married to a duke. You have more power than 90% of the kingdom. He crossed to where she sat. The question is whether you're brave enough to use it. The challenge in his voice ignited something in her chest. Fine, then teach me how. He smiled. That same terrible expression she was learning meant he approved. Tomorrow we start household management. Thornfield is a disaster. You're going to fix it. With no staff? With the staff you recruit. From where? The village. Ashford fired everyone, but they still need work. You'll hire them back on your terms. Eliza stared at him. You want me to rebuild your household staff. I want you to prove you can command authority. If you can manage the people who work here, you can manage the nobles who'll judge you in January. It was a test. Obviously, but it was also an opportunity. What's my budget? Eliza asked. The Duke named a figure that made her blink. That's generous. That's strategic. Pay well, inspire loyalty, and make sure every person you hire understands they answer to you, not to whoever bribed them to abandon Thornfield in the first place. The next morning, Eliza rode into the village with 2 guards and a list of former staff members the Duke had provided. The village was small, gray, and hostile. She felt eyes tracking her from every window as she climbed down from the carriage. Whispers followed her down the main street. The innkeeper's wife spat in the dirt as Eliza passed. Clearly, Ashford's propaganda had reached the locals. The first house belonged to a woman named Margaret Pratt, former head cook. Eliza knocked. The door opened a crack. What do you want? Margaret's voice was cold. I want to offer you your position back at Thornfield. Not interested. I'm offering double your previous wages. The door opened wider. Margaret was 60, broad-shouldered, with hands scarred from decades of kitchen work. Double? Plus a signing bonus and full authority over the kitchen. No interference. Why? Because the Duke needs a functional household, and I need someone competent running the kitchens. Eliza met her eyes. I know you were told to leave. I know you were probably paid to go. I'm offering you the chance to come back on better terms. Margaret studied her. You're the new Duchess, the one who trapped him. I'm the Duchess who signed the wrong paper, which makes me either an idiot or very unlucky. Either way, I'm here now, and I need a cook. Lord Ashford said you'd fail, that the Duke would annul the marriage within a month. Lord Ashford has been wrong before. Something flickered in Margaret's expression, almost like respect. When do I start? Tomorrow. Bring anyone from your previous kitchen staff who wants to return. Same offer applies. Margaret smiled. You've got spine. Girl, I'll give you that. By the end of the day, Eliza had recruited 11 people. A cook, 2 maids, a stable master, 3 footmen, a groundskeeper, and 2 general laborers, all former Thornfield employees, all hungry for work and willing to gamble on the strange new Duchess, who paid well and didn't ask questions about their loyalty. She returned to the estate exhausted and triumphant. The Duke met her in the courtyard. How many? He asked. 11. His eyebrows rose fractionally. I expected 4, maybe 5. I offered good wages and better terms. Using what negotiation strategy? Honesty. I told them I was new, inexperienced, and willing to pay for competence. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. That's either brilliant or reckless. It worked. For now. But there was something in his voice that sounded almost like approval. That night, Mrs. Calloway's expression was tight as she served dinner. The arrival of new staff had clearly rattled her. Quite the recruitment effort, Your Grace, she said to Eliza. I'm sure Lord Ashford will be interested to hear how quickly you've settled in. I'm sure he will, Eliza replied calmly. Please give him my regards when you write your next report. Mrs. Calloway's face went white. The Duke's expression didn't change, but Eliza felt his attention sharpen. I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Calloway said. Of course you don't. Eliza smiled. My mistake. The housekeeper fled the room. When they were alone, the Duke spoke quietly. That was dangerous. That was necessary. She needed to know we're aware of her surveillance. You just declared war. No, I just stopped pretending. Eliza met his eyes. If we're going to survive this, we can't keep playing defense. We need to control the narrative. And you think antagonizing Ashford's spy is controlling the narrative? I think showing strength is better than showing fear. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. A real sound, rough from disuse. You're either going to save this estate or burn it to the ground. I'll take either outcome over slow collapse. His smile faded, but something remained in his eyes that looked almost like respect. That night, they found 7 new listening devices hidden throughout the master suite. The Duke destroyed them methodically while Eliza watched. He's escalating, she said. Yes. What happens when he runs out of patience? Then we find out exactly how far he's willing to go. The answer came 3 days later. Eliza was reviewing supply inventories in the library when Margaret burst through the door. My lady, you need to come now. What's happened? The stable. It's on fire. Eliza ran. Smoke poured from the stable roof in thick black columns. Flames licked at the wooden beams. Horses screamed inside, trapped and terrified. The Duke was already there, shouting orders, directing the new stablemaster and 2 footmen toward the burning structure. Get the horses out, he roared. Now! The stablemaster ran inside, emerged 30 seconds later leading 2 panicked horses, ran back in. The roof groaned. It's going to collapse, one of the footmen yelled. There are still 4 horses inside. The stablemaster turned to run back. The Duke grabbed him. You'll die. Then I'll die getting them out. He wrenched free and ran into the inferno. Eliza watched in horror as flames consumed the entrance. 5 seconds. 10. 20. The roof beam cracked with a sound like breaking bones. The Duke swore and ran toward the burning stable. Eliza moved without thinking. She grabbed his arm with both hands. Don't. Let go. No. Eliza, you'll die and accomplish nothing. She held on even as he tried to pull free. You can't save him. The roof collapsed. The entire structure came down in an explosion of sparks and screaming timber. The Duke stopped fighting her. They stood together in the courtyard, watching the stable burn, knowing the stable master was dead inside. When the flames finally died hours later, they found his body near the back stalls. He'd gotten the last horse out before the roof fell. The horse survived. He didn't. That night, Eliza sat in the library while the Duke interrogated the footman. No one had seen anyone suspicious. No one had smelled accelerant. But the fire had started in 3 different locations simultaneously. Arson. When the Duke finally dismissed the staff, he sank into the chair across from Eliza. Ashford's done playing, he said quietly. He killed a man. He sent a message. Next time it won't be as stable. Eliza's hands shook. We need to leave. Go back to London. Get help. Running proves we're vulnerable. Ashford wins. Staying gets us killed. Maybe. But dying here is better than surrendering everything my family built to that bastard. She wanted to scream, wanted to shake him, wanted to make him understand that pride wasn't worth their lives. But she looked at his face, at the exhaustion and rage and desperate determination carved into every line, and understood. This wasn't about pride. This was about the only thing he had left to fight for. Then we fight, Eliza said. He looked at her, really looked. You're sure? No, but I'm not running. Something shifted between them in that moment. An understanding, an alliance forged in fire and blood and shared terror. They were in this together now. For better or worse? Probably worse. 3 days later, a letter arrived bearing Lord Ashford's seal. The Duke read it twice, then handed it to Eliza without comment. Your Grace, I was distressed to hear about the unfortunate incident at Thornfield. Such a tragedy. I do hope your new bride wasn't too shaken by the violence. I'm writing to extend a personal invitation to the winter gathering. I'm eager to meet the woman who finally captured the Iron Duke's heart. I've heard such fascinating stories about how you met. Do bring her. I insist. Yours in friendship, Lord Ashford. Eliza's blood went cold. He's not even pretending anymore, she whispered. No, he wants us to know he's hunting. The Duke's voice was stone, and he wants us to walk straight into his territory where he controls everything. We're not going. We have to. Refusing would confirm we're afraid. We should be afraid. He just murdered someone, which is why we need to be smarter. The Duke stood and moved to the window. Outside, workers were clearing the stable ruins. We have 3 weeks before the gathering, 3 weeks to prepare, 3 weeks to turn you into someone Ashford can't break. And if he breaks me anyway? The Duke turned. His eyes were hard as winter ice. Then we both go down fighting. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to become someone else, but it was enough time to learn how to fake it. Eliza stood in front of the mirror while Margaret pinned the hem of a gown that cost more than her family's annual household budget. Deep emerald silk that made her skin look less pale, less ordinary. The neckline was lower than anything she'd ever worn. The waist was cinched tight enough to make breathing an exercise in determination. You look like a duchess, Margaret said, mouth full of pins. I look like I'm playing dress-up. Same thing, really. Margaret sat back on her heels. Nobility's just a performance everyone agrees to believe. The Duke appeared in the doorway. He'd been in and out all morning, reviewing security arrangements for the journey to Ashford's estate. Now he stopped, eyes scanning Eliza with the same clinical assessment he'd use on a horse before purchase. It'll work, he said finally. High praise. You asked for honesty, not flattery. He dismissed Margaret with a nod. When they were alone, he circled Eliza slowly. The dress is good. The posture needs work. You're still apologizing with your shoulders. I'm not apologizing, I'm just shrinking. Stop it. He touched her shoulder blades, pushing them back. A duchess takes up space. She doesn't ask permission for it. His hands were surprisingly warm through the fabric. Eliza forced herself to hold the position, even though every instinct screamed to hunch forward, to make herself smaller, to disappear. Better, he said. Now walk. She crossed the room, turned, walked back. Your steps are too quick. You look like you're running an errand. I am running an errand, from here to there. No, you're gliding, deliberately. Every movement is intentional. He demonstrated, a slow, controlled walk that suggested he had all the time in the world and expected everyone else to wait for him. Again. Eliza tried, failed, tried again. Slower, you're not in a hurry. We leave in 2 hours, which means you have time to learn this. His patience was infinite and infuriating. Again. By the time they finished, Eliza's feet ached and her temper was frayed to nothing. But she could walk like someone who expected the world to move around her instead of the other way around. Small victories. The Duke's carriage was built like a fortress on wheels, reinforced sides, armed guards, extra horses in case of ambush. They weren't taking chances. Not after the stable. Eliza settled into her seat while the Duke gave final instructions to the skeleton crew staying behind to protect Thornfield. Margaret appeared with a basket of food. "For the journey, my lady." "It's a full day's ride." "Thank you, Margaret." The cook hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Mrs. Calloway left this morning, just vanished, took nothing with her." Eliza's stomach tightened. She knew we were leaving. "Probably went straight to Lord Ashford to report everything she's seen these past weeks." Margaret's expression was grim. "Be careful, my lady. That man's got a reputation for—" She stopped. "For what?" "For destroying people who get in his way, and making it look like accidents." The carriage door closed. The Duke climbed in across from Eliza. Outside, Margaret stood with the other staff, watching them leave like they were heading to an execution. Maybe they were. The first hours passed in tense silence. The Duke read through a stack of correspondence while Eliza watched the countryside roll past. Gray sky, bare trees. Everything looked dead or dying. "Tell me about Ashford," Eliza said finally. The Duke didn't look up from his letters. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you haven't told me." He set down the papers. "He's 62, widowed twice. No legitimate children, but several bastards he's placed strategically in noble households. He controls mining interests, textile mills, and half the shipping routes on the eastern coast. Politically, he's moderate publicly and ruthless privately. Why does he hate you specifically? Because my father humiliated him. And because I've blocked every attempt he's made to seize Vale holdings for the past decade." The Duke's jaw tightened. "But mostly because I exist. Some men need enemies to define themselves. I'm his." "What's he like, personally?" "Charming, intelligent, utterly without conscience." The Duke met her eyes. "He'll try to separate us at the gathering, get you alone, offer sympathy, maybe suggest that you've made a terrible mistake marrying me. And then?" "And then he'll wait to see if you break, if you run, if you give him ammunition to use against our marriage." Eliza absorbed this. "So I can't trust anyone at this gathering." "You can trust me. Everyone else is either an enemy or a potential one." "Wonderful. 3 days of paranoia and performance. Welcome to noble society." They stopped at a coaching inn as the sun set. Different from the last one, larger, more expensive, crawling with aristocrats making the same journey to Ashford's winter gathering. The Duke checked them in under his full title, making sure everyone in the common room knew exactly who they were. Eliza felt eyes tracking her as they climbed the stairs. "They're staring," she whispered. "Good. Let them. Let them report back to Ashford that we arrived together, comfortable, clearly united." His hand settled at the small of her back. Possessive, deliberate. A performance for the watching crowd. Their room was nicer than the last inn. Larger bed, actual privacy. No obvious listening devices, though the Duke checked anyway. "We're clear," he said finally. Eliza collapsed into a chair. "How do you live like this? Constantly performing, constantly watched?" "You get used to it. That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." He poured 2 glasses of wine from the bottle waiting on the sideboard, handed her one. "You did well today. The dress, the posture, the walk. You looked like you belonged. I felt like a fraud. Everyone feels like a fraud. The trick is not showing it." He sat across from her. "Tomorrow will be harder. Ashford's estate is enormous, hundreds of guests. Every conversation will be a test. No pressure. Exactly the right amount of pressure." He drank. "I need you sharp, Eliza. Not comfortable. Fear keeps you alert." "I'm terrified. Does that count?" Something flickered in his expression, almost like sympathy. "Yes, use it." They ate dinner in the room, avoiding the common area and its prying eyes. The food was good, the wine was better, and for the first time since the stable fire, Eliza felt like she could breathe. "Your first wife," she said, the wine loosening her tongue. "What was her name?" The Duke went very still. "Catherine." "Did you ever try to make the marriage work?" "No." "Why not?" Because I didn't know how. I was young, drowning in my father's debts, fighting battles on every front. She wanted attention I couldn't give, love I didn't have. Eventually, she stopped asking, and you let her disappear. I let her exist in the same house without existing in my life, which is worse. He refilled his glass. When she died, I felt relief, not grief. Relief that I wouldn't have to keep pretending. The honesty of it was brutal. Do you regret it? Eliza asked. Every day? Then why are you making the same mistake with me? He looked at her directly. I'm not. You're not Catherine. You don't want romance. You want survival. That I can give you. Is that all this is? Survival? What else would it be? Eliza didn't have an answer. They slept in the same bed, maintaining the same careful distance. But sometime in the night, Eliza woke to find the Duke standing at the window, staring out at the dark courtyard with an expression that looked like grief. She didn't speak, just watched him stand there, shoulders tight, hands gripping the window frame like it was the only thing holding him together. Eventually, he returned to bed. Eliza closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. They arrived at Ashford's estate mid-afternoon. The place was obscene, a palace disguised as a country house, sprawling across the landscape like something designed to make visitors feel inadequate. Marble columns, manicured gardens even in winter, a fountain in the shape of Neptune surrounded by stone dolphins. He's compensating for something, Eliza muttered. The Duke's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Servants in Ashford livery swarmed the carriage. Their luggage was whisked away. A steward appeared to escort them inside. The entrance hall made Vale House look modest. Crystal chandeliers, gold leaf ceiling, portraits of Ashford ancestors staring down with expressions suggesting they'd all died of smugness. Duke Vale. The voice was smooth, cultured, and laced with venom disguised as honey. How delightful to see you. Lord Ashford descended the grand staircase like an actor making an entrance. He was exactly as the Duke had described, handsome in a weathered way, impeccably dressed, smile bright, and utterly empty. Lord Ashford. The Duke's tone could freeze water. Thank you for the invitation. Of course, and this must be... Ashford's eyes landed on Eliza. The famous Duchess. I've heard so much about you. He took her hand and kissed it. His lips were cold. Your Grace, Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. Your estate is magnificent. How kind, though I suspect it pales in comparison to Thornfield. His smile sharpened. I was so sorry to hear about the fire. Such a terrible accident. Accidents happen, the Duke said flatly. Indeed they do, with alarming frequency it seems. Ashford released Eliza's hand. But you're here now, safe and sound. Let me show you to your rooms. They followed him through hallways that felt designed to disorient. Left turn, right turn, upstairs, down corridors. Eliza tried to memorize the route and gave up after the fourth identical hallway. Their suite overlooked the gardens. Luxurious. Private. Probably monitored. I'll leave you to rest before tonight's dinner, Ashford said. We'll have a chance to talk properly then. I'm very curious about how you two met. The door closed behind him. The Duke immediately began searching for listening devices. Found 3 within 5 minutes. He's not even subtle, Eliza said. He doesn't need to be. This is his territory, his rules. The Duke crushed the devices methodically, which means we need to be smarter than we've ever been. Dinner was a battlefield disguised as a social event. 60 guests crammed into a dining room built for 40, every seat strategically placed. Eliza found herself between a baroness who looked at her like she was something scraped off a shoe and a viscount who kept trying to look down her dress. The Duke sat across the table, 3 seats down, unable to help. So tell me, Your Grace, the baroness said, her voice carrying across nearby conversations. How exactly did you meet the Duke? I've heard such conflicting stories. Every head within earshot turned. Eliza felt the trap spring shut. She could panic, stumble, give Ashford exactly what he wanted, or she could fight. We met during a contract signing, Eliza said clearly. I was managing my family's accounts. He was managing his duchy. We found we had more in common than expected. How practical. I prefer practical to romantic. Romance fades, shared purpose endures. The Baroness blinked. You don't believe in love? I believe in partnership. The Duke and I understand each other. That's worth more than infatuation. Across the table, the Duke's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested approval. The Baroness turned to her neighbor, clearly disappointed by Eliza's composure. Small victory. The Viscount tried next. I heard you signed the contract by mistake. Terrible scandal. I signed where I was directed. The contract was witnessed by 3 legal professionals. Hardly a scandal, just a marriage. Eliza met his eyes. Though I understand some people need drama to make their lives interesting. The Viscount's face went red. Ashford's voice cut through the chatter from the head of the table. Your Grace, Duchess Eliza, I'm so glad you could join us. I was just telling Lord Pemberton about your remarkable rise from household manager to Duchess in a single afternoon. Quite the achievement. The entire table went silent. Lord Ashford is too kind, Eliza said. Though I'd argue that managing a household and managing a duchy require similar skills. Organization, attention to detail, the ability to identify problems before they become disasters. How fascinating. And have you identified any problems at Thornfield? The question was a knife wrapped in silk. Eliza smiled. Several. I've been addressing them systematically. The Duke has been very supportive. I'm sure he has. Though I imagine it's been challenging. Thornfield is such a isolated estate, so far from society. Must be lonely. I prefer isolation to crowds. Too many people, too much noise. Thornfield is peaceful. Even after the fire? The table held its breath. Especially after, Eliza said calmly. Rebuilding teaches you what's essential. We're stronger for it. Ashford's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. He'd tried to rattle her, failed. The conversation moved on, but Eliza felt the weight of every gaze in the room, measuring, judging, reporting back to whoever paid for their observations. After dinner, the women retired to the drawing room while the men stayed for port and politics. Eliza found herself surrounded by aristocratic women who circled like sharks scenting blood. You must give us beauty advice, one said, her tone suggesting Eliza needed it desperately. Your complexion is so natural. I use soap and water. Revolutionary, I know. Laughter rippled through the group. Not kind laughter. Another woman leaned in. And your dress, so simple. Where did you have it made? Thornfield, local seamstress. I prefer supporting local craftspeople. How admirably. Provincial. Eliza was drowning. She'd handled Ashford's direct attack, but this death by 1,000 cuts from women who'd perfected cruelty as social art, was different. Ladies. A new voice cut through the mockery. An older woman, 60s, dressed in black with diamonds at her throat. I believe you're boring our guest with fashion talk. The circling sharks parted. The woman extended her hand to Eliza. Duchess Rothmore. I knew the Duke's mother. You have her eyes. Eliza had no idea if that was true. Thank you, Your Grace. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. They moved to a quieter corner of the drawing room. Duchess Rothmore studied Eliza with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. You handled Ashford well at dinner. I tried not to give him ammunition. Smart girl. He'd been planning this gathering for months. Invited every gossip and political rival the Duke has. This entire event is designed to expose you as unsuitable. I know. And yet you came anyway. We didn't have a choice. Duchess Rothmore smiled. There's always a choice. You chose to fight. That's more than Catherine ever did. Eliza's breath caught. You knew her? Briefly. Poor thing was lovely but weak. She wanted to be rescued. Yupa? Rothmore tapped Eliza's wrist. You want to survive. Much better foundation for a marriage. The Duke and I aren't. We don't. Oh, spare me the denials. I've been married 3 times. I know what a real partnership looks like. She glanced across the room to where the men were rejoining the women. He's watching you. Has been all night. That's new. Eliza followed her gaze. The Duke stood near the doorway, eyes scanning the room until they found her. Relief flickered across his face so quickly she almost missed it. He was worried, Rothmore said. About you, alone with this nest of vipers. She patted Eliza's hand. He's changing. You're changing him, whether either of you realizes it yet. Before Eliza could respond, the Duke reached them. Duchess Rothmore. His bow was respectful. I see you've met my wife. Met her and approved of her, unlike that cluster of harpies you left her with. Rothmore's tone was acid. You should circulate, Duke. Show everyone this marriage is solid, and you... She pointed at Eliza. Stay sharp. Ashford's not done testing you. She swept away. The Duke offered Eliza his arm. Shall we? They moved through the drawing room together, a united front. People watched, whispered, calculated. You survived, the Duke said quietly. Barely. Rothmore doesn't give approval lightly. That helps. Does it? More than you realize. She's influential. If she's endorsing you publicly, others will follow. They reached a quieter alcove near the terrace doors. The Duke positioned himself so he could see the room while appearing to focus on Eliza. Ashford's going to escalate, he said. Tonight was just reconnaissance. Tomorrow, he'll push harder. How? I don't know yet, but... He stopped. Across the room, Ashford stood talking to a severe-looking man in expensive but understated clothing. They were looking directly at Eliza. Who's that? Eliza asked. The Duke's expression went granite hard. Lord Chief Justice Blackwell, the man who handles annulments. Eliza's stomach dropped. Ashford brought a judge? Not just a judge, the judge. If anyone can find legal grounds to void our marriage, it's Blackwell. What do we do? We don't panic. We don't give him anything to work with. The Duke's hand tightened on hers, and we stay together, no matter what he tries. The next morning brought new horrors. Eliza woke to find an envelope slipped under their door. Inside, a single sheet of paper with 3 words in elegant script. She's not real. What does that mean? Eliza demanded. The Duke crumpled the paper. It means Ashford's starting rumors, probably claiming you're a fraud, an actress I hired to play my wife. That's insane. That's politics. Truth doesn't matter, only what people believe. So what do we do? We go downstairs for breakfast and act like nothing's wrong. The breakfast room was filled with whispers that died when they entered. Eliza felt every eye tracking her movements as she filled her plate with food she couldn't imagine eating. They sat together at a small table. The Duke made a show of serving her tea, asking about her preferences, behaving like an attentive husband. Ashford appeared at their table. Good morning. I hope you slept well. Perfectly, the Duke lied. Excellent. I've arranged an entertainment for this afternoon. Lawn games. Very informal. I thought it would be a lovely opportunity for everyone to get to know your bride better. Trap. Obvious trap. How thoughtful, Eliza said. I'm so glad you approve. Ashford's smile was poisonous. The other ladies are very eager to spend time with you. Duchess Rothmore especially requested your presence. He walked away. He's separating us, Eliza said quietly. Yes. The lawn games will split guests by gender. I won't be able to stay close. So I'm on my own. You can refuse, claim illness, and confirm I'm weak? Eliza shook her head. No, I'll go. I'll survive. The Duke looked at her with something that might have been admiration or concern. Be careful. The lawn games turned out to be croquet played with vicious intensity. Eliza stood on the manicured grass in a dress completely unsuitable for sport, surrounded by women who smiled like knives. Duchess Rothmore appeared at her elbow. Stay close to me. Don't engage with the Baroness. She's Ashford's creature. Don't drink anything the blonde woman offers. She's been known to use mild poisons for entertainment. This is entertainment. This is war disguised as leisure. Welcome to noble society. The game began. Eliza had played croquet exactly once, at a village fair when she was 12. She was terrible at it. The women circled her like wolves, making sympathetic noises when she missed shots, offering advice that was actually sabotage. Poor thing, you really weren't raised for this, were you? I'm sure you'll improve with practice, perhaps in a few years. The Duke must be so patient. My husband would never tolerate such inexperience. Eliza gritted her teeth and kept playing. Then the Baroness made her move. Tell me, Your Grace, what was your father's profession? Before the Harrow family came into their title, I mean. Silence fell. This was the attack, the proof that Eliza didn't belong. My father gambled, Eliza said clearly. Lost most of our estate, left my family drowning in debt. Is that what you wanted to hear? Gasps rippled through the group. How honest, the Baroness said. Yes, I'm not good at lying, which is probably why this marriage works. The Duke values honesty over performance. Eliza met the Baroness's eyes. Though I understand some people prefer pretty lies to uncomfortable truths. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that I'd rather be honest about my failures than pretend perfection, but perhaps that's just my provincial upbringing showing. Duchess Rothmore laughed, a real delighted sound. Well said, girl. The Baroness's face went purple, but before she could respond, screaming erupted from the house. Everyone turned. Servants ran across the lawn. Guests emerged from the terrace looking confused and alarmed. And then Eliza saw him. The Duke, walking across the grass with controlled fury, holding something in his hand. He reached Eliza and grabbed her arm. Not rough, but urgent. We're leaving, now. What's happened? He showed her what he held, a forged letter, allegedly from Eliza to her sister Vivian. The content was damning, confessions of trapping the Duke, plotting with Ashford, planning to seize the Vale fortune and disappear, all in handwriting that looked eerily like Eliza's own. Ashford planted this in our room, the Duke said. Someone found it and brought it to Blackwell. The judge is demanding an investigation. Eliza's world tilted. I didn't write that. I know, but proving it will be difficult. Ashford appeared, face arranged in concern, so fake it was almost impressive. Your Grace, what's this about a forged letter? You know exactly what it's about. I assure you, if someone has made accusations, I had no knowledge. You had every knowledge. You orchestrated this entire charade. The Duke's voice was arctic. But you made one critical mistake. Oh? You assumed I'd believe it. Ashford's smile slipped. The evidence is quite compelling. Evidence you manufactured, which means you had access to samples of my wife's handwriting, time to create a convincing forgery, and the arrogance to think I wouldn't notice the differences. The Duke held up the letter. This is good work, but the writer uses left-slanted script. Eliza is right-handed. Her natural slant goes the opposite direction. Silence. Ashford recovered quickly. Nevertheless, Lord Blackwell has questions. Lord Blackwell can direct his questions to my solicitors. We're leaving. That would be most unwise. Fleeing suggests guilt. Staying suggests I'm stupid enough to remain in a house controlled by a man who just committed fraud. The Duke's grip on Eliza's arm tightened. Send your accusations to London. We'll address them through proper legal channels, not through your staged theatrical production. He turned and walked away, pulling Eliza with him. Behind them, chaos erupted. Guests arguing, Ashford shouting orders, Blackwell demanding they stay. They kept walking, reached the carriage. The Duke shouted at his guards to prepare for immediate departure. What about our luggage? Eliza asked. Leave it. We're not staying another minute in that viper pit. 5 minutes later, they were rolling through the gates at dangerous speed. Eliza sat across from the Duke, shaking with adrenaline and terror. He tried to destroy us. Yes. And we just ran. We retreated strategically. There's a difference. He's going to tell everyone we fled, that we looked guilty. Let him. The people who matter saw what happened. Rothmore witnessed the whole thing. She'll spread the truth. The Duke leaned back against the seat. Ashford overplayed his hand. The forgery was too obvious, the timing too convenient. Anyone with half a brain will see through it. And those without half a brain? Were already lost to us anyway. Eliza wanted to believe him, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The Duke noticed. He moved across the carriage to sit beside her, took her trembling hands in his. You did well, he said quietly. At dinner, during the games, even when the forgery appeared. You didn't break. I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters. His hands were warm, solid, real. What happens now? Eliza asked. Now we go home. We prepare for Ashford's legal assault, and we prove that this marriage, accidental or not, is legitimate. He looked at her directly. Are you with me? She should say no, should run back to her family, dissolve this disaster, escape while she still could. But she looked at the Duke, at the exhaustion and determination and something else she couldn't name, and knew she wasn't going anywhere. I'm with you, she said. His hands tightened on hers. Then we'll survive this, together. The carriage rolled through the winter landscape toward Thornfield, toward safety, toward whatever came next. Behind them, Ashford's estate faded into the distance. They'd survived his first assault, but both of them knew it wouldn't be his last. They reached Thornfield 3 days later, exhausted and silent. The estate looked different somehow, still gray, still stark. But the new staff had cleared the burned stable ruins and started rebuilding. Smoke rose from chimneys, lights glowed in windows that had been dark for months. Margaret met them at the entrance, face tight with worry. My lady, your grace, there's been trouble. The Duke was off the carriage before it fully stopped. What kind? Legal kind. A man from the courts arrived yesterday. Said he's conducting an investigation into the marriage. He's been questioning staff, examining records, searching the study. Eliza's stomach dropped. Ashford moved fast. Faster than I expected. The Duke strode toward the house. Where is this investigator now? In your study, your grace, helped himself to your private correspondence. The study door was open. Inside, a thin man in judicial robe sat at the Duke's desk, reading through papers like he owned the place. Lord Investigator Marsh, I presume. The Duke's voice could freeze blood. The man looked up, unflustered. Duke Vale, I was expecting you. Expecting me in my own study, reading my private letters without permission? I have authority from Lord Chief Justice Blackwell to conduct a thorough investigation into allegations of marriage fraud. Marsh gestured at the scattered documents. These are relevant materials. These are personal correspondence, protected by law. Not when fraud is suspected. Marsh pulled out a ledger. I've been reviewing your household accounts. Interesting pattern here. You paid no dowry for Lady Eliza. Most unusual for a ducal marriage. Her family's financial situation didn't require it. Or perhaps there was no time to arrange proper settlements because the marriage was fraudulent from the start. Marsh's smile was thin and mean. I've also spoken to your staff. Several confirmed that you and your bride maintain separate sleeping arrangements. Very suspicious for newlyweds. Eliza stepped forward before the Duke could respond. We maintain separate sides of the same bed, as witnessed by the maids who clean our chamber every morning and find both sides slept in. Marsh's eyes narrowed. You're very quick to defend yourself, Duchess. I'm very quick to correct lies disguised as investigation. Careful, my lady. Obstructing a legal inquiry is a serious offense. So is trespassing and theft of private documents. Eliza crossed to the desk and began gathering the scattered papers. Unless you have a warrant specifically authorizing seizure of correspondence, you're breaking the law you claim to represent. Marsh stood. I don't need to tolerate insolence from whom? The Duke's voice was soft and deadly. My wife? A woman of legal standing equal to yours? You'll address her with respect or remove yourself from my property. Silence stretched like a blade. Marsh recovered with effort. Very well, I'll return tomorrow to continue my investigation, with proper warrants. He gathered his things. But I should warn you both, Lord Ashford has submitted extensive documentation supporting his claims. Love letters allegedly between the Duchess and a former suitor. Financial records suggesting the Harrow family orchestrated this marriage to escape debt. Testimony from witnesses who claim to have seen lies, Eliza interrupted. All of it. Then you'll have opportunity to disprove them. In court. Marsh moved toward the door. I'll see you both at the formal hearing in 6 weeks. The summons will arrive within days. He left. The Duke and Eliza stood in the destroyed study, surrounded by violated privacy and manufactured accusations. 6 weeks, Eliza whispered. 6 weeks to build a defense against charges we can't fully see. The Duke began sorting through the scattered papers, checking what Marsh had read. He's seen our financial records, our correspondence, probably planted more forged evidence while he was here. Can we win? I don't know. The honesty was brutal. Ashford spent months building this case. We have 6 weeks to dismantle it. Eliza sank into a chair. For the first time since signing that cursed contract, she felt genuinely hopeless. The Duke noticed. He crossed to her, crouched down so they were eye level. Listen to me, he said quietly. Ashford has money and influence, but he's made critical mistakes. The forged letter at his estate was too obvious. This investigation is too aggressive. He's acting desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. Yes, but desperation makes people sloppy. His hand covered hers. We can beat this, but I need you to fight. I'm tired of fighting. I know, but 6 more weeks, that's all I'm asking. Eliza looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion carved into his face, the weight he'd been carrying alone for a decade. The desperate hope that maybe, finally, he'd found someone strong enough to carry it with him. 6 weeks, she said. 6 weeks. He stood, pulling her up with him. We start now. I need you to write down everything you remember about the contract signing, every detail. Who was in the room? Who handed you the pen? What was said? Everything. Why? Because Ashford's case depends on proving the marriage was fraudulent. If we can prove it was a legitimate accident, witnessed, legal, binding, his entire argument collapses. Eliza spent the next 3 days reconstructing that afternoon in excruciating detail. The Duke brought in 2 solicitors from London, men he trusted absolutely. They reviewed every piece of evidence Marsh had examined, looking for planted forgeries. They found 4 love letters allegedly between Eliza and a fictional suitor. Financial documents suggesting the Harrow family had paid the Duke to marry Eliza. A statement from a housemaid claiming she'd overheard Eliza confessing the fraud. All forgeries. All convincing. All nearly impossible to disprove without extensive handwriting analysis and witness testimony. He's been planning this for months, the lead solicitor said. Maybe years. This level of preparation suggests he's been waiting for an opportunity to strike. And I handed him one by getting married, the Duke said. No, Eliza corrected. I handed him one by signing the wrong contract. The solicitor looked between them. The accident is actually our strongest defense. No one would orchestrate fraud this convoluted. It's too risky, too dependent on variables no one could control. Can you prove it was an accident? The Duke asked. Possibly, but we'll need testimony from everyone present. Your former solicitor, the Harrow family, the witnesses. He hesitated. There's a complication. What? Lord Ashford has convinced your former solicitor to testify that the contract switch was deliberate, that Lady Eliza specifically requested to sign the marriage contract instead of the property agreement. Eliza's blood went cold. That's a lie. I know, but Pemberton is willing to swear to it under oath. Ashford must have offered him something significant. Money? The Duke said flatly. Or threats, possibly both. Can we discredit him? Eliza asked. Difficult. He's a licensed solicitor with decades of reputation. His testimony carries weight. The Duke stood and walked to the window, staring out at the gray landscape. Then we need someone whose testimony carries more weight, someone Ashford can't bribe or threaten. Who? He turned. Vivian. Eliza's heart stopped. No, she was there. She watched the entire signing. She saw exactly what happened. She'll never testify against our family's interests. Mother would disown her. She'll testify if you ask her. The Duke met Eliza's eyes. You're her sister. She owes you. The letter to Vivian took Eliza 4 hours to write. She tore up 6 drafts before finding words that weren't either pathetic begging or furious accusations. Vivian, I need your help. Lord Ashford is trying to prove our marriage was fraudulent. He's convinced witnesses to lie, forged evidence, and painted me as a scheming fortune hunter. The hearing is in 5 weeks. I know you didn't want this marriage. I know Mother is probably furious that I stole your future, but you were there. You saw what happened. You know it was an accident. I'm asking you to testify, to tell the truth. Not for my sake, though I'm desperate, but because letting Ashford destroy us with lies sets a precedent that no one is safe from. If he can manufacture fraud this convincingly, he can do it to anyone. Please, Eliza. She sent it by private courier, waited 3 agonizing days for response. The reply came in Vivian's familiar looping script. I'll come. Not because I forgive you, but because you're right. Mother will be furious. I don't care. Give me 2 weeks to arrange travel. V. Eliza showed the Duke. He read it twice. She's coming. Yes. Your mother will make this difficult. My mother makes everything difficult. Eliza took back the letter. But Vivian's testimony could save us. Could, not will. The Duke's realism was exhausting and necessary. Ashford will try to discredit her, claim she's lying to protect family interests. Then we need more than just her testimony. What are you thinking? Eliza pulled out the list she'd been making. We need proof that Ashford has a pattern of this. Other people he's destroyed with manufactured evidence. Other families he's ruined. If we can show this is his method, that he's done it before, the court has to question everything he's presented. The Duke stared at her. That's brilliant. That's desperation. Same thing. He grabbed his coat. I know where to start looking. 3 weeks before the hearing, they had assembled a case. Duchess Rothmore provided testimony about 2 other families Ashford had destroyed through similar fraud accusations. A mining company owner came forward with documentation showing Ashford had planted false evidence to seize his business. A former Ashford servant gave a sworn statement about being ordered to forge letters. It wasn't enough to guarantee victory, but it was enough to fight. Vivian arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, stepping out of her carriage like she was entering enemy territory, which, in a sense, she was. Eliza met her in the entrance hall. They stared at each other. Sisters who'd never been close, now bound together by disaster. You look terrible, Vivian said. You look perfect as always. Liar. I haven't slept properly in weeks. Mother's been... She stopped. We shouldn't talk about Mother. Probably not. Awkward silence. Then Vivian crossed the space between them and hugged Eliza so tightly it hurt. I'm sorry for all of it. For being relieved when you got trapped. For not fighting harder when they dragged you away. Eliza's eyes burned. You couldn't have changed anything. I could have tried. Vivian pulled back. But I'm here now. Tell me what you need. They spent 2 days preparing Vivian's testimony. The Duke's solicitors drilled her relentlessly. What she saw, what she heard, what she could swear to under oath. The solicitor pointed to the left contract, Vivian said for the 40th time. Eliza signed it. No one questioned it until after the Duke had already signed the right contract. And you're certain your sister didn't deliberately switch the documents? The solicitor pressed. I'm certain Eliza was barely paying attention. She was taking notes on household accounts. She signs documents constantly, invoices, receipts, orders. She signed reflexively when handed a pen. Vivian's voice was steady. My sister is many things. A schemer isn't one of them. The backhanded compliment made Eliza smile despite everything. 2 weeks before the hearing, Ashford made his next move. A letter arrived addressed to the Duke. Inside, an offer. Drop the defense. Agree to annulment. I'll withdraw all charges, pay substantial compensation, and ensure the Harrow family's debts are forgiven. Everyone walks away intact. Refuse, and I'll destroy you. Your reputation, your holdings, your name. I have resources you can't imagine and patience you can't match. This is your last chance to avoid complete ruin. Choose wisely. The Duke read it aloud to Eliza and the solicitors. He's panicking, the lead solicitor said. If he was confident in his case, he wouldn't offer settlement. Or he's trying to make us drop our guard, Eliza countered. Make us think we're winning so we get careless. Either way, we refuse, the Duke said. I'm not giving him the satisfaction. Even if refusal means risking everything, the solicitor asked, especially then. 1 week before the hearing, Eliza received a visitor she never expected. Her mother. She arrived unannounced, sweeping into Thornfield like an avenging storm. Eliza met her in the drawing room, braced for fury. "You've made a disaster of everything," her mother said, without preamble. "Good to see you too, Mother." "Don't be flippant. Do you understand what you've done? Dragging Vivian into this legal nightmare, refusing Ashford's settlement offer, risking public scandal that will destroy our family name. Our family name was already destroyed. Father gambled it away. I'm trying to salvage what's left." Her mother's expression flickered, something between rage and grudging respect. "By fighting a man who has crushed stronger opponents than you? By refusing to surrender to lies? Pride is a luxury you can't afford. It's not pride, it's survival." Eliza stood. "Ashford wants to prove I'm a fraud. That I trapped the Duke for money and status. If I accept his settlement, I'm admitting he's right. Every woman in the kingdom will be vulnerable to the same accusations." Her mother went quiet. "You think you're fighting for yourself," she said finally. "You're not. You're fighting for every woman who's ever been dismissed as unsuitable, every girl who's been told she doesn't belong." She crossed to Eliza. "I was wrong about you. You're not weak. You're the strongest person I know." Eliza's throat closed. "Mother, don't. I'm not good at apologies." Her mother's smile was brittle. "But I'm excellent at testimony. Tell your solicitors I'll swear under oath that you had no knowledge of which contract you were signing, and that anyone who claims otherwise is lying." The hearing was held in the High Court of Parliament, a massive stone building designed to make defendants feel insignificant. Eliza sat beside the Duke at the defendant's table, wearing the emerald dress from Ashford's gathering, armor disguised as silk. Across the aisle, Ashford sat with his team of lawyers, looking confident and cruel. Lord Chief Justice Blackwell presided, face carved from judicial stone. "This court will now hear arguments in the matter of Ashford versus Vale, concerning allegations of marriage fraud," Blackwell announced. "Prosecution may begin." Ashford's lead prosecutor stood. He was good, painting Eliza as a desperate social climber who'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to trap the Duke. He presented the forged letters, the manufactured financial documents, Pemberton's false testimony. It looked damning. Then their defense began. The Duke's solicitor systematically dismantled every piece of evidence. Handwriting experts testified that the love letters were forgeries. Financial analysts proved the documents were fabricated. Former Ashford servants described his pattern of manufacturing evidence against enemies. Vivienne took the stand, described the contract signing in perfect detail, never wavered under aggressive cross-examination. Eliza's mother testified, confirmed Eliza's habitual document signing, her tendency to work on household accounts during family events, her complete lack of social ambition. Duchess Rothmore provided character testimony that made half the courtroom sit up straighter. By the third day, the prosecution's case was crumbling. On the fourth day, the Duke took the stand. "Did you know you were marrying Eliza Harrow when you signed the contract?" the prosecutor demanded. "No." "Yet you refused to void the marriage. Why?" "Because it was legal, binding, and voiding it would have created the exact scandal Lord Ashford is now manufacturing. Or because you were complicit in the scheme. If I was complicit in a scheme to marry Eliza Harrow, I would have arranged it properly, with dowry negotiations, family settlements, proper announcements, not through a contract mix-up in front of 6 witnesses." The Duke's voice was ice. "The chaos of that afternoon is the best proof we have that no one planned it. Yet you've benefited from this marriage. I've gained a wife who rebuilt my household, stood against my enemies, and refused to break under pressure that would have destroyed most people." The Duke looked directly at Ashford. "If that's a scheme, it's the most elaborate and unprofitable one I've ever encountered." The courtroom murmured. Finally, Eliza took the stand. Ashford's prosecutor circled her like a predator. "Lady Eliza, you expect this court to believe that you accidentally signed a marriage contract? I don't expect anything. I'm telling you what happened." "You signed a legal document without reading it?" "I sign legal documents constantly. Household invoices, vendor contracts, staff agreements. I was managing my family's accounts that day. When someone handed me a pen and indicated where to sign, I signed. I didn't look at the header." "How convenient. How ordinary. Ask anyone who manages household finances. You sign dozens of documents weekly. You can't read every one or you'd never finish. And we're supposed to believe the Duke didn't notice the error? The Duke was reviewing property amendments with his solicitor. He signed what was in front of him. We all did. The error wasn't discovered until both contracts were signed. Eliza leaned forward. If this was a scheme, it was the stupidest, most overcomplicated scheme in history. Easily discovered, impossible to control, dependent on variables no one could predict, or brilliantly constructed to appear accidental. By whom? Me? A woman who'd never met the Duke before that day? Who had no reason to want this marriage? Who gained nothing except a life of constant scrutiny and judgment? Her voice rose. You're giving me credit for intelligence I don't possess and ambition I've never had. I made a mistake, a stupid, careless mistake, and I've spent every day since trying to survive the consequences. Silence fell across the courtroom. The prosecutor tried several more angles, failed, sat down looking frustrated. Blackwell called for closing arguments. The Duke's solicitor stood. This case was built on forgeries, coerced testimony, and manufactured outrage. Lord Ashford has spent months constructing a fraud to accuse the defendants of fraud. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so malicious. The evidence is clear. This marriage was an accident. Binding, legal, but entirely unintentional. To claim otherwise requires believing in a conspiracy so elaborate it would make theatrical fiction look simple. Ashford's prosecutor countered, but his arguments felt hollow now, stripped of their supporting lies. Blackwell dismissed the court to deliberate. 3 hours later, they returned. This court finds no evidence of deliberate fraud in the marriage of Duke Roderick Vale and Lady Eliza Harrow, Blackwell announced. The marriage is ruled legitimate and binding. All charges are dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Ashford's face went purple with rage. The Duke's hand found Eliza's under the table and gripped it hard. Furthermore, Blackwell continued, voice cutting through the noise, this court finds credible evidence that Lord Ashford knowingly presented forged documents and coerced testimony. He will face separate charges of fraud and obstruction of justice. Ashford stood. This is an outrage. This is justice, Lord Ashford, something you've avoided for too long. Blackwell's gavel fell. Court is adjourned. Eliza couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process that it was over. We won, she whispered. We won, the Duke confirmed. Around them, people crowded close, congratulating, celebrating, apologizing for doubting them. Duchess Rothmore embraced Eliza. Vivian cried. Even Eliza's mother managed something resembling pride, but Eliza only saw the Duke, the relief washing over his face, the weight lifting from shoulders that had carried it too long. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not breaking, for fighting, for being stronger than anyone had the right to expect. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice. You chose to stay. The truth of it settled between them. 6 months later, Thornfield was unrecognizable. The staff had tripled. The burned stable was rebuilt. Gardens bloomed where there'd been only bare ground. Light poured from windows that had been dark for years. Eliza stood in the newly renovated library, reviewing estate ledgers, when the Duke found her. Still balancing books? He asked. Someone has to make sure we're not being robbed blind. I hired 3 accountants for that. I don't trust them yet. She smiled. Give me another 6 months. He crossed to where she sat. They'd fallen into an easy companionship over the past months, partnership built on survival and slowly deepening into something neither of them wanted to name. I have something for you, he said. He handed her a document, a property deed, for a small estate in the Southern Hills transferred entirely into her name. What is this? Your dowry, retroactively granted. You should have had independent property rights from the beginning. I know you don't need it. I'm giving it anyway. He sat across from her. You saved my estate, my reputation, and probably my life. This is inadequate compensation, but it's a start. Eliza stared at the deed, at the freedom it represented, the security, the acknowledgement that she wasn't just the Duke's wife. She was her own person. Thank you, she said quietly. Thank you for not running when you had the chance. I thought about it. I know, but you stayed. He reached across the desk and took her hand. I'm glad you did. The touch was familiar now, comfortable, something they'd both stopped questioning. What happened to Ashford? Eliza asked. Convicted of fraud, stripped of 2 minor titles, fined heavily. The Duke's smile was grim. Not enough to destroy him, but enough to cripple his influence. He'll spend the next decade rebuilding what he lost. And we'll be here, thriving. Eliza looked around the library, at the life they'd built from disaster, at the partnership forged in fire and desperation. This wasn't what either of us wanted, she said. No. But it's what we needed. Yes. He stood and pulled her up with him. For a moment they just stood there, hands linked, survivors of a war neither had chosen. I should get back to the accounts, Eliza said, or you could take a walk with me. The gardens are actually pleasant now. Is that an order? It's a request from your husband, who occasionally enjoys your company. She laughed. Occasionally? Frequently, but I'm trying not to be sentimental. They walked through gardens that bloomed with careful cultivation, past the rebuilt stable where new horses trained, through grounds that felt alive again. At the edge of the property, overlooking the valley, they stopped. Do you ever regret it? Eliza asked. The marriage, the accident, all of it. The Duke considered. I regret that you were trapped, that you didn't choose this freely. But I'm grateful for what came after, for discovering that the wrong person turned out to be exactly right. He looked at her. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. And you? Regrets? Eliza thought about that afternoon in the study, the pen in her hand, the signature that changed everything. I regret the fear, the danger, the constant fighting. But I don't regret finding out who I actually am, what I'm capable of, who I can be when everything's on the line. She smiled. Turns out I'm not invisible after all. You never were. The world just wasn't looking properly. They stood together as the sun set over Thornfield, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Two people who'd started as strangers bound by accident, who'd become allies through necessity, and who'd discovered, somewhere in the chaos and terror and desperate survival, that partnership could transform into something deeper. We should go in, the Duke said eventually. Margaret's making that roast you like. The one with too much rosemary? I told her to use less. She ignored me. Good. I like that she's not afraid of you. No one's afraid of me anymore. You've made me soft. Liar. You're exactly as hard as you've always been. You're just selective about showing it now. They walked back toward the house, side by side, comfortable in the silence that came from truly knowing another person. Inside, the staff had prepared dinner. They ate together at the smaller table the Duke had commissioned, close enough to talk, far enough apart to maintain dignity. After, they retired to the master suite. The room that had once felt like a prison now felt like sanctuary. Eliza changed into her nightdress while the Duke read by the fire. When she emerged, he set down his book. Come here. She crossed to where he sat. He pulled her down beside him. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous. About us. About this. Oh, he gestured at the room. We've been surviving for so long I'd forgotten what it feels like to just exist without crisis. Is this you being sentimental? This is me being honest. He turned to face her. I married you by accident, but if I could go back, if I could choose, I'd choose you, deliberately, completely, without hesitation. Eliza's breath caught. Roderick, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. But she did have something to say, words that had been building for months, held back by fear and uncertainty and the lingering trauma of everything they'd survived. I choose you too, she said. Accident or not, you're the most infuriating, stubborn, impossible man I've ever met, and I wouldn't trade you for anyone. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face. High praise from someone who once called me heartless. You are heartless, most of the time, but occasionally you're human. I've learned to appreciate those moments. He kissed her then. Not the performative kisses they'd deployed for watching crowds, but something real, earned, built on trust and survival and the slow understanding that they'd become essential to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Eliza laughed. "What?" he asked. "We're terrible at this. The romance part. Completely terrible. But we're good at the partnership part. Excellent at it. So maybe that's enough. Maybe we build on what we're good at and let the rest develop naturally." He pulled her closer. "I can work with that." They sat together by the fire, two people who'd started as mistakes and transformed into something deliberate, something chosen, something that worked precisely because it hadn't been forced or fabricated or built on pretty lies. Outside, Thornfield stood solid against the northern winter. Inside, two people who'd accidentally found each other created warmth that had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with finally being seen, not as contracts or obligations or strategic necessities, but as partners, equals, two people who'd walked through hell and come out the other side stronger for it. The marriage that started with the wrong signature had become exactly right. And in a world that had tried to erase them both, they'd written their own ending, together.